In Germany, we don't say, it is nice that Liam has integrated so well into German society. In Germany, we say, schaff und erwirb, zahl Steuern und stirb. Let's talk about Liam Carpenter's German. Tag an alle. My name is Florian, I have been a German teacher for almost a decade now, and today we're going to be doing something completely different on this channel. We're going to take a look at how well various YouTubers and celebrities can speak German. And as the title might suggest, in true German vagueness, the first victim of this playlist will be Liam Carpenter. But let me introduce you to how all of this is going to work. The rating system. I will gather as many resources as I can and then analyze Liam's grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. After that, I'll rate each individual part of the language on a scale from 1 to 6, with 1 representing the A1 level and 6 the C2 level. For everybody who's not familiar with this rating system, here's a quick explanation. It is known by the charming name CEFR, which is the abbreviation for Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. It consists of 6 levels: A1, A2 for beginners, B1, B2 for intermediate learners, and C1, C2 for advanced users of the language. The learning curve looks something like this. So it's not a gradual increase in knowledge. After evaluating each category, I will add up the points and give a final rating. Please keep in mind that this is my personal opinion based on my experience as a teacher and not an official score. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the analysis. Linguistic background. Liam was born in Chatham, England, which is a port town in the county of Kent. In this area, estuary English is spoken, which is some kind of a mix between Cockney and received pronunciation, and Liam's English fits right into that. Some of its key features are, it's non-rhotic, so he doesn't pronounce the R at the end of syllables.
The German character standing next to each other.
He glottalizes his T's, so a typical bottle of water contender.
Bottle opener, of course. 9. I'm going with B, tap water.
And he makes use of goose fronting, so his U sounds more like an U. Remember that. This will become essential for one specific thing later on. But why is all of that important? Well, whenever you learn another language, you use the sounds that are most familiar to you, so those of your native language. So we can explain a lot of his accent and intonation by referring to estuary English, which is something I'll do here and there in this video. Some features help him speak better German and others are actively working against him. You'll see what I mean. But before we get into pronunciation, we have to talk about his grammar. Now, there aren't too many videos of him speaking German a little longer, so I have to work with what I've found. Based on the information from an interview with Hazel Brugger, he has officially passed the B1 exam.
How good is your German? Do you take German classes or can you just speak it now? Or
Sometimes I can switch it on. I have officially I have B1.
Oh, B1, that's
B1 and done.
This supports the fact that his grammar is actually quite decent. He doesn't really make beginner mistakes anymore, but let's take a closer look. The first thing I notice is that he often ignores V2 word order. What does that mean? In German, every sentence can be broken down into 4 segments, or fields as we say. If you have a main clause, the first verb is always put into the second field, no matter how you start the sentence. For example, ich trinke jeden Tag Kaffee, I drink coffee every day, has the verb trinken in the second field. Now if you put jeden Tag, every day, in the first field, the verb still remains in the second field, so you got jeden Tag trinke ich Kaffee. In English, you don't do that. You say every day, comma, I drink coffee. And this is what Liam does as well.
Im ersten Jahr, ich bin nach England geflogen.
Here, im ersten Jahr is the first field that denotes time, and the verb has to follow in the second field. So what he should have said would be, im ersten Jahr bin ich nach England geflogen.
Und jetzt?
Ja, nein, sag's nicht.
Ich habe Glück.
Even though he had little break between him finishing the sentence and his wife Valerie speaking, Germans would still carry on with the grammar of the main clause. Und jetzt habe ich Glück. By the way, und is not considered part of the main clause because it is a conjunction and it is placed in field 0. Interestingly, he knows about the rule that the main verb goes to the end of the sentence in a subordinate clause, when he says,
Wenn du mich zum Bahnhof bringst.
This is a clear sign of being at the B level, because beginners are always more likely to say, wenn du bringst mich zum Bahnhof. Anyway, moving on.
Aber ich glaube, nächstes Jahr, die wird es probieren.
Again, aber, but, is a conjunction, so the 0th field. And then ich glaube, as a fixed expression, can be followed up with a comma and a new main clause, so no problem here. However, in that main clause, the V2 rule was broken. Ich glaube, nächstes Jahr wollen die das probieren would be correct. In fact, he said something like wird or würde, which is a bit weird here. He probably meant to say die werden, they will, or die wollen, they want to, since the context of the sentence was next year they will try that or they want to try that in Britain too. The last thing I found interesting about this bit was that he replaced the personal pronoun sie, they in this context, with die, the plural article, which is something we Germans do on a regular basis. It creates some type of familiarity and an informal register if you do that. Something along the lines of those guys over there. This is actually quite advanced, so props to him. Moving on, he knows about pronominal adverbs. Here's an example.
Was sagst du dazu?
Was sagst du dazu means what do you say to that? And in German, you can't really say zu das, like to that in English. That would be grammatically incorrect. So you have to put da first and then just add the corresponding preposition. Dafür, for that. Dahinter, behind that. Dagegen, against that, etc. It kind of works like the English therefore, thereby, therein, but in German it doesn't sound awkward or old-fashioned and it's much more fleshed out. Pronominal adverbs are B1, B2 grammar, so that's a plus for Liam. Alright, besides that, he sometimes uses words in weird positions, like here.
Auf einmal hatte dich diese Idee mit einer deutschen Klischee zu machen.
The preposition mit isn't really needed here, and he forgot to mention the medium that contains these German clichés. So I'd rather phrase it like this. Auf einmal hatte ich die Idee, Videos über deutsche Klischees zu machen. Suddenly I had the idea to make videos about German clichés. But I'd attribute that to being under a lot of pressure for an interview. I know how I would react if I was going to be on British television, so let's not be too strict here. And the last bit I found for the grammar section.
11 years. Schäm dich nicht.
Schäm dich nicht is a command that translates to don't be ashamed. But here Liam meant to ask, schämst du dich nicht? Aren't you ashamed? Even though both sentences use the verb in the first field, the difference is in the verb form. A yes-no question for the informal you uses the normal second-person singular form of the verb. Sich schämen, schämst du dich? Keep in mind that this is a reflexive verb, so don't forget the reflexive pronoun dich. A command, on the other hand, uses the imperative form, which can mostly be deduced by cutting off the st ending of the second-person singular and leaving out du. Du schämst dich, schäm dich. Here's another example with sich erinnern, to remember. Erinner dich an das Wort. Remember the word. Erinnerst du dich an das Wort? Do you remember the word? And that's it for the grammar part. Liam knows a lot of constructions and doesn't make typical beginner mistakes. He places verbs at the end of subordinate clauses and uses pronominal adverbs. Sure, he sometimes messes up the V2 word order, but I think it depends on the topic he talks about. I did watch some footage where he used the correct order, so he must have learned it at some point. He also speaks slowly and consistently, which is something I really recommend in general. So I'd give him 4 out of 6 points, which equals B2. I will say, however, that I don't have enough material of him speaking German to verify that. For example, I haven't heard him use more complex conditional clauses or the passive, which both are B2 as well. So to sum things up in Liam's words, in Germany we don't say Liam's grammar is actually quite advanced, which comes as a bit of a surprise. We say, ja, die Grammatik ist nicht von schlechten Eltern. Anyway, let's move on to pronunciation. German is known to be quite difficult to pronounce for English natives, not only due to our r, but also because of consonant clusters and vowel quality. But let's take a step back. For this section, I'm going to be using letters from the IPA, not Indian Pale Ale, but the International Phonetic Alphabet, to talk about sounds. Maybe some of you have seen these letters before, but I won't go into too much detail here. You'll pick them up as we go along. Now, let me be really blunt from the get-go. Liam has a typical British accent, not as strong as others I've heard before, but still quite noticeable. And having an accent isn't generally a problem if it doesn't cause confusion or misunderstandings. And that does not happen to Liam. I can understand 99% of what he's saying. So immediately that puts him above the A level, because at that level people still struggle to pronounce certain words, and they'll say them in ways that confuse native speakers. But how good is Liam's pronunciation? Let's take a look. I'll start off with the German CH sound, or rather the two CH sounds, as there are two varieties of them. We differentiate between the hard ch after the vowels a, o, u, and the soft ch after all other vowels, e, I, e, ö, ü, so including the umlauts, and after consonants. Now, complete beginners just turn both into k, so wir suchen dich, we're looking for you, turns into this.
Yo! We're sucking dick! We're sucking dick!
Liam does that sometimes. He's actually capable of pronouncing the hard ch.
Und dann voll aufmachen. Also ich gebe nur, ja, voll aufmachen. Also ich google auch, aber
But here and there, the good old k is shining through.
man muss einfach es erleben.
But when it comes to the soft ch, he kind of turns that into sh, like in the Russian word welche, or in Japanese shibainu, since this sound is much closer to sh, which can be found both in German and English. Think sheep or schaf. Let's have a listen.
Und dann habe ich einfach weitergemacht.
Ich wollte eine Story über dich erzählen.
This sh sound is much easier for English natives to do because you only have to slightly shift the position of your tongue forwards if you start with sh. So it's a compromise. Sh, 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 sh. And also, it's not a big deal because a similar sound shift is happening to us, German natives. The sh in schaf or schön and the ch in ich or echt are merging into sh in some people. Here's an example with a German native.
Der Mensch ist ein Gewohnheitstier, das ist manchmal gut und manchmal schlecht.
He said, das ist manchmal gut und manchmal schlecht, where I would say, das ist manchmal gut und manchmal schlecht. Do you hear the difference? Now, if you want to pronounce these two sounds correctly, here's how you do it. For the soft ch, say the word hue or huge and try to isolate the very first sound you hear. Hue, huge. For some of y'all, that'll be it, but most of you will have to press the tongue a little harder against the palate. Huge. And for those of you who are from New York and say stuff like human and huge, there's no hope.
I went from running it to being a terrible human being.
For the hard ch sound, you can try to say the Scottish Loch Ness. If that doesn't work, try emulating an explosion. Anyway, let's move on to the most notorious sound of the German language, our r. But first, some pronunciation rules. R is only pronounced if it's at the beginning of a syllable. If it is at the end of a syllable, we actually pronounce it more like a dull a. So it is reden, hören, and brauchen, but Wasser, sehr, and Flur. No r here. You can also find both sounds in one word, as in
And now say Rohrreiniger.
Rohrreiniger. The two R's at the beginning of each syllable are pronounced, the two R's at the end aren't. That's how it works. Now, let's see how Liam fares. He replaces the r sound with either the English r or a tapped r, depending on the environment. Here are some examples for the English r.
Diese Reaktion, wie oft ich mit meiner Frau Zeit verbringen könnte, das ist meine Priorität in meinem Leben.
And here are some for the tapped r.
Dann kommt die richtige Idee.
Du musst dann zurück nach Stuttgart, mich abholen, dann zurück nach
Ja, da hatte ich
Hause.
richtig Mitleid mit dir.
The fact that Liam can roll his R's has probably something to do with Brits generally being able to imitate old and posh RP.
Oh, Gerald, I do love you, but you're so terribly, terribly poor.
Although I gotta say, in recent months, Liam has demonstrated that he is capable of producing a uvula r, like in this example.
Rohrreiniger.
Rohrreiniger.
If he keeps practicing with words like this, it'll become second nature eventually. By the way, if you want to be able to pronounce the German r, you can start with the hard ch we talked about earlier. And the only thing you need to do is to switch on your vocal cords. Okay, now if you don't have that muscle memory, you can start with two sounds you're already familiar with, s and z. Try to hold them and switch your vocal cords on and off. Now do the same for ch. Your tongue stays in the exact same position and you just switch on your vocal cords. Alright, let's talk about a fun one. Do you remember when I mentioned goose fronting at the start of this video? Well, it is the reason why Liam confuses U and Ü, which is also why Valerie brought up his pronunciation of Nudeln.
My favorite was when we met and you started speaking German. You always said Nudeln. instead of
Yeah.
Nudeln.
The ooze
You really can't like
always confused me.
So, why is that, and why do most Americans not have the same problem? Okay, I need the vowel chart for this. So, the German U is at the top right of this chart. Most languages of the world have that sound, and you produce it by retracting your tongue and rounding your lips. U. The German Ü is located at the far left corner on the opposite side of the chart. As you can see, E, like in field, is right next to it, and a reliable method of pronouncing the German Ü is to start with E first. You then keep your tongue at the exact same position and only round your lips. Ü. So U comes from the back of your mouth and Ü from the front. Now how does all of that have anything to do with Liam? In his native English dialect, Estuary English, the goose vowel, which is a real linguistic term for the vowel sounds in words like group, pool, or precisely goose, sounds like this. Ü. It is more fronted than the general American U I'm using, hence the name goose fronting. It is right in between Ü and U. Ü, U. Here, have a listen.
You really do love cake.
Huge sweet tooth. I moved away from where my family was living when I was 16. Push it too far.
In German, however, we don't have Ö in our phonetic inventory, so in our minds it sounds like an Ü. There's a bit more to it, with long and short U's and Ü's, but this would go beyond the scope of this video. Anyway, that is the exact reason why Liam confuses these two sounds, as he's only used to Ü in the middle.
Da gibt es einen deutlichen Unterschied.
Unwetter.
Unwetter.
And don't get me wrong, splitting the U and turning it into Ü or U at the right places can be pretty challenging, like here.
How I pronounce it?
Yeah.
Ugh.
No.
Ugh.
No.
Ugh.
No.
Ü.
No.
You.
Ooh.
Ooh. Ooh.
No.
Ooh.
It's not an It's Urinstinct.
Urinstinct.
Okay.
It also sometimes happens that Liam uses an U where he should have used an Ü, like in Adrenalingefühl.
Diese Adrenalingefühl war da.
This little thing is actually called hypercorrection, and it's the application of a rule in the wrong situation. Germans do that in English too, where we use an English W for words that contain a V, despite the fact that we don't have a W sound in German. So we say stuff like advice or individual.
We have good individual players like Jeff Verfahren.
No advice, and if I would give him an advice, I wouldn't do it in this room.
Alright, some more pronunciation. From the footage I've seen, Liam often mispronounces the ER ending in words like weiter or schneller.
Und ich habe einfach weitergemacht. Also hier in Deutschland geht es ein bisschen schneller an der Kasse aus in England.
He says something like weiter or schneller. It's a subtle difference, but it's kind of a big deal. ER in British is but in German it's always pronounced a somewhat dull a. For example, the British English meter would be Meter in German. Do you hear the difference? The reason this matters is that a lot of German words can only be differentiated by these two sounds. For instance, Miete, Mieter, Liebe, Lieber, Wette, Wetter, Lage, Lager. Or the indefinite article in different cases, eine, einer. A good way to practice this dull a sound is to imitate a stereotypical Australian accent, meter, weather, better, and try to isolate that a sound. Or if you're unsure, just say it as a regular a and make it a bit duller, ah. Now on to a positive thing. Liam swallows the e in verb endings, which sounds very natural. Erzählen instead of erzählen.
Eine Story über dich erzählen.
Sortieren instead of sortieren.
Also wie genau du musst also alles sortieren.
Or probieren instead of probieren.
Nächstes Jahr die würde es probieren.
If you want to sound even more natural in German, you can take this concept a step further. Instead of defaulting to n at the end, try to use the consonant that is closest to the consonant you used before the swallowed e. Don't say üben or kippen, say üben, kippen. Don't say reden or retten, say reden, retten. Don't say sagen or schmecken, say sagen, schmecken. And finally, don't say hören or rühren, say hören, rühren. Yeah, you can just swallow the r as well, like Liam does. Alright, last but not least, two smaller mistakes. First, he often leaves out the glottal stop when it's necessary. The glottal stop is a sound you produce when saying uh-oh, or in Liam's dialect, butter.
Butter sponge. Butter. You know, butter. You mean butter? Yeah, butter.
This is actually quite the common sound in German, but since we don't write it, it can be hard to anticipate where you have to use it. A general rule is, if a syllable starts with a vowel, especially after a prefix, you use the glottal stop. So it's not
Ja, hallo Ordnungsamt.
but Ordnungsamt. And it's not
Erinnerst du dich?
but erinnerst du dich? By the way, this is one of the reasons why many people perceive German as very, erinnert ihn an eine Abmachung. Or if you speak faster, erinnert ihn an eine Abmachung. Still a lot of And finally, the second thing he doesn't do is final obstruent devoicing. Okay, hold up, what the hell is that? Well, you know how in English the meaning of a word can change depending on whether you have a voiceless consonant like p, t, k, or s at the end of the word, or a voiced consonant like b, d, g, or z. A bet is something else than a bed. A bus is something else than a buzz. And a lip is something else than a lib. Anyway, we don't have that in German. A voiced consonant at the end of a word will always be devoiced. So it's not Alltag, but Alltag with a K. Listen to how the German narrator in this interview pronounces the word and how Liam does it.
Die Ideen kommen Liam im Alltag.
Also die beste Inspiration, ich mache etwas im Alltag.
Alright, we finally covered almost every detail of Liam's pronunciation. As mentioned, I wouldn't put him in the A level because every German will be able to understand what he's saying. But from the get-go, I can say that it's not a B2. There are just too many things I could point to, and his accent clearly exposes him as an English native. So, 3 points, or B1 it is. In Germany, we don't say, Liam might have to improve his accent here and there. In Germany, we say, da gibt's noch einige Baustellen. Vocabulary. Being able to speak correctly and have a nice accent is important, but having a large active vocabulary is even importanter. Now, how can I estimate the number of words Liam knows? This is actually kind of tricky because linguists don't even know what a word is, but I can rely on a few tricks. I created a list with sentences and individual words from 5 to 6 videos where Liam speaks German for more than 10 seconds and ran them through AI. It then counted the so-called lemmas, which are the basic units of various words. For example, to break, breaks, broke, broken, breaking all count as one lemma because the meaning is the same, only the grammar changes. However, the word unbreakable would add 2 more lemmas to the mix because the speaker would have to know the suffix able, that turns a verb into an adjective of possibility, and the prefix un, negating that adjective. It goes much deeper than this, but I think you got the gist of what lemmas are. Now, the sample with Liam's speech includes roughly 160 to 180 distinct lemmas, which the AI separated into these categories. Most of it is A-level stuff, but there was some B1 and even B2 vocabulary, like Mülltrennung, Dachfenster, and
Streichholzschächtelchen.
Now, I agree with almost everything, but I'd omit international words such as Inspiration, Klischee, Adrenalin, or Priorität, since any English native could just guess them. I mean, guess the German word for morphology. Exactly, Morphologie, so that doesn't really count. Altogether, the AI gives a rating of B1, where all these lemmas translate to a vocabulary size of roughly 2,500 to 3,000 words. Now that's great, but I'm also going to use my intuition as a German teacher here. It is very clear to me that Liam actively uses German since he utilizes filler words and colloquial speech in the right situations. Here's a pretty good example of that.
Also ich schätze auf jeden Fall meine Familie.
The word also doesn't really have a translation, but it could mean something like, well, or you know. And auf jeden Fall literally translates to in any case, but it could also mean for sure. So his sentence was something like, I appreciate my family for sure, which sounds very natural in German. He also listens to a lot of German, but gets things mixed up from time to time.
Du kannst nicht umkippen.
He clearly knew that bringing a window into this position in Germany had something to do with the verb kippen, to tilt, but he didn't realize that umkippen translates to collapse or to faint. So, du kannst nicht umkippen translates to you can't collapse. What he meant to say was, du kannst die Fenster nicht auf Kipp stellen, you can't tilt the windows. But you only have that kind of language feeling if you listen a lot. All in all, his vocabulary is solid. He mostly uses simple words and rarely talks about anything abstract, but he demonstrates a very good foundation in idiomatic phrases. He's relatively quick in combining thoughts and expressing them precisely. So if it was just pure lexical variety, I'd actually stick to A2, But after everything I talked about, I'd say B1, so 3 points. In Germany, we don't say it would be a good idea for Liam to focus more on abstract vocabulary now. We say besser spät als nie. Final rating. Alright, I've babbled enough and it's time for me to show you the overall rating. For grammar, I gave Liam 4 points, for pronunciation 3 points, and for vocabulary 3 points as well, so 10 points in total. But before I tell you the final rating, there are some extra points to be given or taken away. Let's start with the good. Liam comes up with a lot of cross-language puns like these.
It's a Seelachsbrötchen. I don't want to see that brötchen again. But how did I vod? It's back. Backfish, stimmt. Mate, yes. Matthias, good one. Oh, who would put that in a roll? Ach, roll mobs. Thank you. Bruh.
This is incredibly hard to pull off and requires deep knowledge in both languages, so +1 extra point. Now, one thing I need to be a dick about is the time spent in Germany versus the time spent learning the language. By the time this video comes out, Liam will have spent 11 years in Germany, and B1 or B2 for that matter is quite low compared to the average time needed. It's kind of hypocritical for me to say that, as I'm making this video in English, thus if he sees it, doesn't learn anything from it, but Liam is aware of that himself.
Wie lange bist du schon in Deutschland? 11 years. Wie bitte? 11 years.
Anyway, +1 - 1 equals 10 points after all, and if we divide that by 3, the 3 main categories, we end up with 3.3. A strong B1. However, if, by any chance, you're watching this video, Liam, and think I've evaluated you unfairly, please don't hesitate to contact me. And that's it, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and if you know a YouTuber or celebrity that I should analyze next, let me know. Since this series is still in its infancy, there will be a lot of changes, but this is exactly where I need your help. Do you like these long format analyses? Should I go super in-depth or keep it easy going? Drop all of your ideas down in the comments and I'll see you guys very soon. In Germany, we don't say, this was a very interesting video to make and I wish Liam all the best for his German adventure. In Germany, we say, aus den Augen, aus dem Sinn.